Earth's life support systems are failing. Humanity is surpassing critical environmental thresholds and increasing the risk of triggering irreversible climate tipping points. It's hard to overstate the perilousness of our trajectory. While we have seen incremental local gains in a wide range of climate, biodiversity, and environmental fronts, the good news is overshadowed by an avalanche of deadly climate disasters, breached planetary limits, and worsening global risk. A 2025 article titled Living Beyond Limits examines planetary boundaries, a scientific framework for identifying critical Earth system processes. The study concludes humanity has breached 7 of the Earth's 9 ecological limits. Another groundbreaking 2025 study titled Breaching Planetary Boundaries found that 60% of global land areas exceeds safe ecological thresholds for functional biosphere integrity, with 38% in high-risk zones. As explained by renowned climate scientist Michael Mann, our situation is precarious. We don't know precisely how close we are to triggering some devastating tipping point that could threaten human civilization, Mann said. Scientists have been warning us about climate threats for decades. Despite intensifying warnings, we're not responding at the required scale. The climate crisis is a growing cause of mortality that is already causing millions of premature deaths each year. Efforts are woefully insufficient, and we're rapidly running out of time to avoid the worst impacts. In the State of Climate Action Report for 2025, not a single one of the 45 indicators assessed is on track to achieve the 1.5C aligned targets by 2030. As stated in the report, global efforts are failing to materialize at the pace and scale needed to keep the Paris Agreement goal within reach. Carbon dioxide emissions, the primary driver of climate change, reached a record high in 2025. After declining for years, emissions in the United States and the European Union have started growing again. Global CO2 emissions rose from 35 to more than 38 gigatons annually between 2015 and 2025, despite pledges to peak by 2020. Globally, CO2 emissions are at record high levels, pushing us beyond the upper threshold temperature limit agreed at COP21 in Paris, 1.5 to 2 degrees C above pre-industrial norms. The rate of warming is increasing, and climate impacts are hitting us decades sooner than predicted by scientific models. This has profound implications for ecosystems and human societies. The failure to keep temperatures within acceptable limits is a moral failure, according to United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres, who said, "We're inflicting irreversible damage on the planet." The 2025 State of the Climate Report sounds the alarm about escalating global risks. Subtitled Planet on the Brink, the report opens with the following words: "We're hurtling towards climate chaos. The planet's vital signs are flashing red. The consequences of human-driven alterations of the climate are no longer future threats, but are here now. This unfolding emergency stems from failed foresight, political inaction, unsustainable economic systems, and misinformation. Almost every corner of the biosphere is reeling from intensifying heat, storms, floods, droughts, or fires. The window to prevent the worst outcomes is rapidly closing." The 425 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere in 2025 is an all-time high, and this is way above the safe upper limit of 350 parts per million. This puts the world at risk for 2.6 C of warming. According to Bill Hare, CEO of Climate Analytics, this is a global disaster that will trigger major tipping points from which we may not be able to recover. Runaway changes known as climate tipping points are amongst at least 16 critical thresholds that could exceed our capacity to respond or recover. The Breaching Planetary Boundary study concluded that surpassing these tipping points jeopardizes the planet's ability to sustain life. The 2025 Global Tipping Points report concludes that 5 of the Earth's vital systems are close to a point of irreversible change. The report assessed 25 Earth systems that humans depend on. Different studies suggest coral reefs, Amazonian forests, and Antarctic ice sheets are all at risk with temperatures above the 1.5 C threshold. We're rapidly approaching multiple Earth system tipping points that could transform our world with devastating consequences for people and nature, said Tim Lenton, a professor at the Global Systems Institute at the University of Exeter and an author of the report. Year after year, more species of plants and animals are going extinct. We're losing many of these species before we have a chance to identify and understand them. Ecosystems are composed of interdependent webs of flora and fauna. The loss of individual species can contribute to the collapse of the entire ecosystem, putting millions of species at risk. If the Amazon were to collapse, roughly 10% of global biodiversity would be affected. More than 3 million species of plants and animals would die, including 40,000 plants, 3,000 fish, 1,300 birds, 427 mammals, 400 amphibians, and over 370 reptiles, as well as millions of insects. There has been a precipitous decline in life forms at the bottom of the food chain, and this could prove catastrophic. In Germany, insect populations have declined by 75% in less than 30 years. In the U.S., beetle numbers have decreased by 83% in 45 years. As a staple food source, declining insect populations have a direct impact on other species like lizards and birds. The reduction in insect biomass is contributing to the decline of 61% of the world's bird species. Birds are also critical as part of the food web. Research shows that birds can spread up to 12,700 large seeds a day in a square kilometer. The main driver of declining bird populations is deforestation. According to the State of Climate Action and other reports, we're falling far short of stopping deforestation. We're losing between 8 and 10 million hectares of forest annually. According to the Forest Declaration Assessment 2025, the health of the world's forest is in a dismal state, and this constitutes a threat to global biodiversity. In 2025, the Earth crossed another critical ocean threshold as the world's seas absorbed record-breaking amounts of heat. High levels of atmospheric carbon are also wreaking havoc on our oceans in other ways. Oceans absorb 25% of global CO2, forming carbonic acid, and in 2025, this caused the breach of the 7th planetary boundary, ocean acidification. The 2025 global coral bleaching event became the largest such event on record. Almost 85% of coral reef ecosystems are being harmed by increasing ocean temperatures and acidification. This damages shell-forming species. The combination of acidification and heat stress is driving the collapse of half of the planet's coral reefs. The decline of these reefs directly impacts marine biodiversity that millions of people rely on for food and tourism. As oceans warm, they inject heat and moisture into the atmosphere, destabilizing weather systems and driving increasingly extreme global weather. Ocean heat either causes or exacerbates extreme weather events. In 2025, warmer oceans contributed to tropical cyclones, drought in the Middle East, and flooding in parts of Southeast Asia, Mexico, and the Pacific Northwest. Rising ocean heat also contributes to sea level rise through thermal expansion and increases ecosystem stress. Billions of people live in areas where water is increasingly scarce. In 2025, this was evident in the Middle East, North Africa, and the U.S. Southwest. More than half of the world's big cities suffer from high water stress, and more than a third are experiencing extremely high water stress. A UN report announced that the world had entered a state of water bankruptcy, which is worse than crisis because the effects are irreversible. According to this report, nearly 4 billion people face water scarcity for at least 1 month every year. Rivers, lakes, wetlands, and aquifers are drying up, and snowfalls are diminishing. Remaining potable water sources are increasingly polluted. The World Bank estimates the planet is losing about 324 billion cubic meters of fresh water every year. Soil supports 95% of food production, and a third of these soils are already known to be degraded by intensive agriculture. Modern farming methods decrease biodiversity and soil resilience. This means soil has diminished capacity to resist damage and recover its structural and functional integrity. Things like nutrient cycling and water regulation. According to a 2025 study, soil stability is being undermined by plowing, watering, fertilizing, and spraying. The largest threat to soil resistance is erosion due to inappropriate tillage, slash-and-burn agriculture, and overgrazing. Irrigation is vital to modern agriculture, but it can also contaminate the soil with salt. Approximately 20% of irrigated cropland is salt-affected, and the use of plastics can also reduce soil resistance, and pesticides leave residues that can harm soil biodiversity. Ecological breakdown and ecosystem stress are driving systemic dangers. We're at risk from the convergence of climate change, biodiversity loss, deforestation, and warming oceans. Biophysical breakdown is converging with intensifying water scarcity and declining soil resilience. Large-scale environmental degradation is pushing us past critical thresholds and stretching the Earth's carrying capacity to the breaking point. The collective evidence from the past tells us that we've still got a safety margin. Science tells us that if we act quickly, if we act dramatically, we can avoid warming that will bring far worse consequences. That's the fragility of this moment. We have a little bit of a safety margin, but it's not a large safety margin, man said. Well, the Global Climate Change Report suggests that we have 3 years' worth of emissions in our carbon budget to have a chance of keeping temperature within prescribed limits. Others, like venerable biologist David Suzuki, think that it's already too late. Climate scientist James Hansen agrees, saying the RCP 2.6 scenario, which was designed to keep warming under 2 degrees C, is now impossible. Even the GCC report concedes that significant climate impacts are unavoidable. There may still be time to avoid the worst impacts, but there's no room for complacency. Time to avert disaster is running out. Every delay pushes us closer to catastrophe.